Please rise for the arrival of the official party.
Please take your seats. Good morning and welcome to today's co-sponsored event with the United States Institute of Peace and the Atlantic Council of the United States. My name's Paul Hughes. I'm the Chief of Staff here, and I'd just like to explain that after the President delivers his speech, we will be taking questions. We will have individuals on each side of the auditorium with microphones. When you are called upon, please wait for somebody to bring you the microphone and then ask your question to the moderator and the President. I'd like to take this time now to introduce the President of the United States Institute of Peace, Dr. Richard Solomon.
Good morning. I can see that our honored guest has filled the house, and we're delighted to welcome you here for an event that we're very pleased to sponsor with our colleagues from the Atlantic Council. As I was trying to put in context the presentation we're about to hear, it really gets us thinking about the dramatic changes that we're living through since the end of the Cold War. And I think President Saakashvili, his political career and the things that he has done to bring Georgia up to a level of economic development and political change that is part of this new era of the world, this really reflects a lot of the trends that we've been dealing with here at the Institute of Peace, particularly recently in the case of the Arab Spring. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, of course, Georgia and many other countries around the world were freed from the grip of the superpower confrontation, and issues of national identity, territorial issues, strategies for economic development and political reform were put at the top of the national agenda in many countries. From the point of view of the United States and the Institute of Peace, 9/11, of course, was a major transformational event that got us thinking about the character of the post-Cold War period. But then the Rose Revolution that our honored speaker played a leading role in, then reinforced by all the things going on in the Arab Spring world, have indicated that political transformations and the role of mass publics mobilized by information technologies have now become major forces for social change. And we see governments all around the world trying to cope with this mass pressure, reaction against corruption being a major factor of political discontent. And among the things that President Saakashvili is to be noted for is a World Bank report just today saying that he and his country have made major changes dealing with one of the most corrosive factors that are affecting many countries around the world, that is corruption. But a lot more going on, and in that context, I'd like to bring to the podium Damon Wilson, the Executive Vice President of the Atlantic Council, who will give a bit more introduction to our honored speaker. Please, Damon.
Thank you very much, Dick. Good afternoon. I am Damon Wilson, the Executive Vice President at the Atlantic Council. And on behalf of the Council, we're delighted to co-host today's event with the U.S. Institute for Peace. I want to thank you, Dick, Dr. Solomon, Dr. Abby Williams, Paul Hughes, and your team for making this collaboration possible in this spectacular space. I'm delighted and honored to welcome the President of Georgia, His Excellency Mikheil Saakashvili. We're also honored to welcome your delegation to Washington, including National Security Advisor Giga Bakaria, Vice Prime Minister, State Minister for Reintegration Neka Keshelashvili, and of course, I want to thank your fantastic ambassador here in Washington, Ambassador Timur Yakubashvili, who has helped to make this possible but who's also done a remarkable job during his tenure here of raising the profile of Georgia in Washington. As you can see from this crowd, there are many followers of Georgia in town. We're delighted to host President Saakashvili as our guest speaker today on the heels of his meeting with President Obama on Monday, which marked 20 years of relations between the United States and our country in Georgia. The meeting, which President Saakashvili hailed as his most fruitful talk in the Oval Office, included discussions on a range of areas for expanded cooperation, on economic, political, and security issues, which I think are a testament to the strength of our relations with Georgia and our confidence in the success of Georgia's ongoing democratic transformation. President Saakashvili is a longtime friend of the Council, and I'm honored to welcome him back to Washington and to our event here today. At the Council, where our mission is to strengthen the Atlantic community for global challenges, we believe that U.S. and European leadership and partnership with Georgia will be critical to ensure that Georgian democracy deepens and that the country becomes embedded in Western institutions. As part of this effort, the Council has led over the past year and a half a task force on Georgia that's been co-chaired by Senator Jeanne Shaheen and Senator Lindsey Graham. The task force has sought to build a bipartisan consensus in order to advance Georgia's Euro-Atlantic aspirations and its reforms. This past fall, the Council released a report, Georgia in the West, which lays out recommendations for U.S. and European cooperation with Georgia, some of which were outcomes of President Obama's meeting with President Saakashvili this week. And I want to acknowledge our task force members who are here with us today and thank them for their work on that project. But the topic of today's talk is bigger than Georgia. The day after, President Saakashvili on post-revolutionary societies and what comes after the Arab Spring. From our perspective, playing the right role in the region, in the Middle East, North Africa, playing the right role is one of the most important tasks facing the transatlantic community. Certainly, Georgia has undergone tremendous transformation since the Rose Revolution while facing significant security challenges in its neighborhood. Georgia's track record on fighting corruption and improving good governance is an important example for other countries in transition. Georgia's transformation illustrates that for democracy to succeed, visionary leadership must be coupled with a long-term commitment to building strong and balanced institutions and a government that's accountable to its people. We look forward to hearing to the President's views on his ongoing reform agenda in advance of Georgia's next elections and what lessons learned might be applicable to countries in the Arab world and other countries in transition. But before I turn over the podium, let me mention just a few biographical details. President Saakashvili has been president of Georgia since 2004, following the peaceful democratic transition of the Rose Revolution. At 37 years old, he became the youngest president in Europe. Prior to his presidency, Mr. Saakashvili made a name for himself in Georgia as a champion against corruption, first as a member of Georgia's parliament, and then as Georgia's Minister of Justice. His reformist zeal became a trademark of his presidency after the Rose Revolution, as he set out to curb corruption, transform Georgia's institutions, spur economic growth, and bolster people's confidence in government. As a result, today's Georgia stands as a testament of what can be achieved through good governance and political leadership, coupled with strong cooperation and encouragement from Western allies. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us today. Please join me in welcoming the President of Georgia.
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you for this generous introduction. I'm honored to be here today. Needless to say how important this institution is, not only for the United States, but also for my country. And the leadership and scholarship of the U.S. Institute of Peace has made lots of difference. And I owe a special debt of gratitude to Robinson West, the chairman of the Institute, and to Richard Solomon, its president. I understand that Richard is stepping down after 19 years of extraordinary service. And even from us, as far as away as Georgia, we can clearly see what you have achieved, what you have done, how important your contribution to the world peace and to more sustainable U.S. foreign policy as well as world politics has been. And it has special meaning to Georgians, also to 500,000 people in Georgia that had been expelled from the regions illegally occupied by the Russian Federation. Certainly, I'm very grateful to Damon Wilson for this very generous introduction, but also for the role that Atlantic Council plays in covering the region, in advising us, in making things transparent, clear, and in also helping out situations where we need advice, friends, authoritative opinion. Ladies and gentlemen, I came here to talk about the wave of revolutions, changes, and protests that the world has witnessed over the past year and is still witnessing today. The media dubbed these movements as the Arab Spring, but they span far beyond the Middle East and the spring season, respecting no limits of time, geography, or culture. These revolutions and protests remind all of us of freedom, democracy, and accountability matter, and even that they matter more than anything else in the world. More than cultural, political, religious, or social differences. More than fake stabilities and geographic borders. They inspire citizens from the most diverse backgrounds to unite and to undertake the bravest of actions. They move nations and reshape the security environment. Today we are barely 1 year past the moment when an unknown Tunisian citizen named Mohamed Bouazizi immolated himself to protest against injustice, unfairness, lack of absence of hope for him and for his society. 13 months later, we note with amazement how this isolated act of despair has changed the course of history and our perception of the world. Tunisia's dictator Ben Ali was toppled. Hosni Mubarak is gone. Gaddafi is gone. Governments all around the region acceded a diverse extent to public demands for reforms. And the protests grew well beyond the Middle East, including the streets of Moscow, St. Petersburg, and so many other Russian cities. We can barely grasp all that has happened over these past 13 months, nor can we know where these diverse events will lead. We cannot foresee which of these movements will produce Jeffersons and which ones will produce Vladimir Lenins or Khomeinis, which will lead to democracy and which to disappointment and tyranny and despotism. Just beyond these windows, over on the Washington Mall, disoriented tourists that are looking for directions will read, I guess, not with much of a relief, "You are here." Unfortunately, on this side of the Constitution Avenue, where diplomats and scholars try to anticipate the flow of world events, there are not even such markers. Yet, even without a clear map, we can turn for guidance to a series of events that shared several common elements for the velvet revolutions of the late 80s to the color revolutions of the early 2000s, including the one in my own country that the CNN graciously, by accident, baptized as Rose Revolution. My dear friends, Georgia's experience does not provide a transferable model for many countries that have known or will sooner or later know pro-Western uprising. There was no freedom textbook for us, and there is no textbook for our friends ever written. But by reflecting of our post-revolution experience, we might well gain an appreciation of the diverse challenges these societies of transition face. Our peaceful, popular revolution brought a power of young people who want to change the fate of their country and whom I was privileged to lead. Obviously, we had no clear answers how to fix the country and turned out to be even worse shape than we had thought. In 2003, Georgia was an utterly failed state. Government could not supply 80% of the time in winter country with electricity. Police was not only corrupt, but basically criminalized. Government bureaucracy was cynical, and was basically characterized by, they were basically thugs, they were not real civil servants. Regional warlords had more power than public officials. Crime was literally at every corner and every street. Education system was crippled by corruption. To top it all off, we lived in a dangerous neighborhood which was increasingly revisionist Russian Federation at our doors. Aware that half measures would be useless, that our window for reforms would be small, we adopted a whole-of-government approach seeking to radically transform multiple institutions simultaneously. All at once, we undertook to change the police, the tax collection, the customs, the security services, the energy sector, and the education system. Our overreaching priority was a full frontal assault against corruption. Corruption was a virus that has infected all our institutions, rotting and crippling them. Corruption was also the main focus of public anger. Just yesterday, the World Bank issued a major new study entitled Fighting Corruption in Public Services, chronicling Georgia's reforms, which details what our government did to fight corruption and how Georgia's experience might inform anti-corruption efforts in our country. Indeed, as I was told at the World Bank, they published several books in the past on corruption problems in that or other region or in that or other country. This is the first time ever World Bank has published a book on overcoming corruption somewhere. And that's quite a breakthrough for them as well. There are summaries of this study outside the hall, but let me quote you what it becomes the most heartening observation the World Bank made. Georgia's success destroys the myth that corruption is cultural and gives hope to reformers everywhere who aspire to clean up the public services. The cliché that some cultures, people, or religions are inherently corrupt or allergic to transparency has been proven absolutely wrong in my country. In one blow, we fired 16,000 police officers. The country stayed without police for several months. Traffic accident rates went down. Crime rates slightly went down, to the extent that we were starting to wonder whether we need police at all. Then we recruited a new police force that, after 5% rate enjoyed by its predecessors, enjoyed 86% confidence from the population. We created a single nationwide computer-scored merit-based admission test for a university to end the decade-long practice that made bribes the key entry qualification. The going grade had started at about $8,000, more than an average Georgian annual income. We began to apply tax laws. Our ambition was clear: to give the people the sense that they own their state. And it could not succeed without a whole of society's approach. Any change of governance had to be accompanied by a radical social transformation in order to be efficient and sustainable. Soviet Union and post-Soviet regimes, like all authoritarian systems, based their survival by nurturing the divisions of the society. People were artificially opposed to each other at every level in every field. The different religious, social, and ethnic groups were made to be constant rivals, and politics was understood as an art of manipulation, fear, and hatred. So our first task was to embrace multiculturalism and differences. We developed an affirmative action program that covered all spheres from higher education to law enforcement bodies. This approach is not always popular among certain social institutions, but we are determined to making it core priority of our action, because at stake is democratic identity of our nation. Last year, unfortunately against the will of almost all political parties and NGOs, we passed a law that grants legal status to all faith communities in Georgia. The Soviet Union and the post-Soviet regimes had another characteristic: absolute centralization. So we initiated a vast decentralization program, invested in regional development, infrastructure, and spectacularly empowered local authorities. As a result, regions that were once abandoned became the most striking examples of development, and people feel everywhere that they have a stake in their own country's fate, not only thousands of thousands of privileged citizens living in one street in our capital. Ladies and gentlemen, The main achievement of the last 8 years, the key to all our successes, was not much functions of government, but of the Georgian people themselves. Our institutional revolution was enabled by the mental revolution that took place in our country. Only a mental revolution could lead to the Western transformation of our society. Today, Georgians have totally changed the way they think of themselves, of their prerogatives, of their responsibilities, and of their relationships to society and government. Of course, many of our reforms have not produced the results we have hoped to achieve, and we are still very much at work in progress. But nobody can reverse or suppress the transformation that happened in Georgia, neither us nor anybody else. If I had to sum up the lessons I can draw from our experience and share with our friends elsewhere, I would quote the following points. No matter how beautiful and moving popular uprisings are, the real revolution occurs when, after the cameras from CNN, BBC, and the others have left the country. It consists in a long and difficult process of reform that follows. Only a whole of the government and whole of society approach to reform can bring tangible and enduring results. The reform of the judiciary, police, tax collection, customs, political class, electoral code, and education system should not be implemented individually, but as a part of a complete project of social transformation. If even one of these areas is left untouched, then the virus of cynicism will undermine the credibility of the entire effort. You need to put your popularity at risk right away. When you attack interest groups, they bite back, and you will face difficult times. We had our shares of demonstration opposition. I had to resign before the end of my first term in order to win a new popular mandate to keep on the path of reforms. But when you are carried to power by popular uprising, the greatest risk you face is your own inaction, the temptation to temporize in order to enjoy your original popularity. After a revolution, people feel empowered and impatient. They want quick results, and once they become disillusioned and cynical, you have lost the opportunity for change. Because in order to succeed, you need the people to be an active part of your reforms. The citizens, after all, are the real motor of transformation. Woodrow Wilson had it right when he said, liberty has never come from government. Liberty has always come from the subjects of it. So that's my tribute primarily to Georgian people. Those who thought that corruption was inherently a Georgian phenomenon, they severely underestimated my people. Those who thought that by nature we were criminal, and now we are the safest country in Europe, they severely underestimate my people. Those who thought that Georgian people could be bought by fake promises, some breathtaking illusions, not through real things, at the elections, they severely underestimated and underestimate my people. Those who think that Georgian people will ever give up a very difficult, full of resistance road to fighting for freedom in exchange of a illusionary golden cages, promise comfort, they underestimate my nation, my people. In Georgia, the main thing we learned that reforms are important, but the fight for reform is never finished. The biggest mistakes we could make would be to contemplate our rankings by international organizations or read the World Bank book, feel smug about our successes and conclude that we had made it once and for all. It would undermine all our achievements, and it's why the reforms should never stop. Governing is a process of learning, questioning, adaptation, and change. This is what every authoritarian regime always fails to understand. We will not make this mistake in Georgia. My dear friends, revolutions are fought and won by the citizens of these countries. But all of us, international community, should do what we can help. In Georgia's case, a wide range of international think tanks and NGOs, education programs, scholarships helped sow the seeds of our revolution. Ever since, we have done that we can to provide advice and assistance to those in other countries who are trying to forge a similar path, just as we have benefited greatly from the experience of others, especially NDI and IRI, which have shown such profound dedication to Georgia and which continue to show vision and courage in other parts of the world, as we see today in Egypt. We might have disagreements sometimes, but I want to ensure NDI, IRI, NAD, Freedom House, and all the major actors of the democracy community of this town, the vibrant heart of Washington, that Georgia will always be like their home. We know too much that we owe to their commitment and their dedication to freedom. And at a time when many major powers are struggling with sluggish economies and the government deficits, when there is an understandable temptation to cut back on supporting such activities, I would like to remind what a high-value investment the support of our democracy is. The movement towards democracy does not solve every problem or enhance security in every case, but on balance, we will all be more secure with fewer dictatorships and more democracies. When aspiring populations are free to live their lives, practice their trades, raise their children, voice their ideas, and praise their grievances, the space shrinks for the kinds of leaders who sow ethnic hatreds, harbor terrorists, or wage aggressions. Ladies and gentlemen, we can compare the sudden upheavals of 2011 and the ongoing protest to that of what Nassim Nicholas Taleb has called black swans, improbable, high-impact events which amaze us as outliers when they appear, yet in retrospect seem obvious and inevitable. They take us by surprise and force us to recalculate our sense of the possible. They are redefining an international arena, redistributing the cards between regional and global players. See, from our part of the world, two radical different attitudes emerge, embodied by two specific regional powers. On the one hand, the Russian Federation reacted with panic and outrage to the Arab Spring and tries everything it can to prevent any international support to the democracy movements anywhere. On the other, Turkey asserts itself as a role model for the post-revolutionary countries and the main friend of freedom lovers for the Muslim world. On the one hand, the government of Vladimir Putin desperately tries to hold the progress of history. On the other, the administration of Prime Minister Erdogan that decides to embrace the evolutions of the world. Two very different prime ministers. And it is not a coincidence if Russian influence is decreasing while Turkish leadership is growing every day in the region. This is a lesson and a message of hope. There is no future for global powers playing against the will of their own people. Ladies and gentlemen, as most of you know, on Monday I had the honor to meet President Obama in the Oval Office. I was impressed by his vision and his knowledge of dynamics of my region. Of course, I was pleased to hear him telling the media that Georgia is the role model for reforms, democracy, and transparency in the region, and praising the institution building that has taken place. These were humbling words to hear, and I'm grateful to the President for his unwavering support. But we could never have achieved so much without the United States, its leadership, its diplomacy, its NGOs. On Monday, President Obama went deeper and continued engagement in pursuing a free trade agreement between Georgia and the United States. It's a major breakthrough for us. We are a booming economy. We are the easiest place to do business in Eastern Central Europe and post-Soviet world, according to the World Bank. We have the world's fastest customs procedure, the world's fastest property registration, the world's fastest company registration. We have the one-window principle where to get passport in Georgia, it takes roughly 10 minutes, driver's license few minutes, to get customs clearance for any kind of cargo, 7 to 10 minutes. But I wonder what you need passports for, because later you don't have even to take it out from your pocket. You can pass through gates in the airport once you have it in your pocket for electronic chips. So you don't even need the passports. So we moved forward. But the free trade agreement would be very important. We also got strong support from President Obama on our NATO membership application. These kind of commitments make our democracy safer and also explain why America is and will remain the indispensable leader of the free world. As I stressed to President Obama, we are determined in return to be a security contributor to the Western community of nations we aspire to join, not just a security consumer. This is why we have deployed we are deploying almost 1,800 soldiers to Afghanistan, to Helmand province without any caveats, with losses that we've incurred in terms of killed and wounded. And certainly we had them there, and we nearest days, as I said, we nearly are doubling our commitment. This is not easy for any country, including that of my country, for any population, but it is simply necessary. And I will finish with this. The main message I wanted to carry with me to Washington is this one. There is no such thing as American decline. Despite the economic problems and the doubts about the future, 2011 has shown that the values on which America is based are on the rise. People all around the world are ready to risk their lives and their values, their lives for these values. This is a fantastic message of hope, and this is what really matters in the end of the day. It means that authoritarian models might look strong and present impressive growth rates, but they propose no credible and universal alternative. It was a mistake to proclaim the end of history after the fall of the Berlin Wall and to think that the progress of liberal democratic values in the world would not be challenged anymore. Let's not make the opposite mistake now. Let's not give in to pessimism, depression, and relativism. Let's not overlook the universal call for freedom that we are witnessing in the most diverse part of the world. Let's not allow cynical people or isolationists to prevail. Those people who think that, well, America's age is over, because America is not an empire. It's not certainly empires of the past. It's an idea. It's a force for good. The other day I was together with my friends at a base camp summit in California, and we were in a room with a number of people recently arrived in America 1, 2, 3 years ago, like people from Middle East, Korea, other regions. And you know, I was looking at them, and it related to my own experience. I came to America on a congressional fellowship in the 90s. I lived in a basement in Astoria, Queens, studied law, had hardly money even to get bananas by the end of the month from a neighboring grocery store. They already knew me and would hand over some bananas when I would come by the end of the month because my scholarship was, so I was over. But you know, within 2 years, I was already working for a major law firm on the 42nd Street. I had an apartment on Central Park West, but more than that, I had this sense of entitlement and unlimited opportunities for the future. I had the sense that in this country everything is possible. I was looking at this crowd a few days ago in California, and I was thinking, look at them. They've just newly arrived in this country. They talk American, their body language is American, they think American. They are almost American. And with all due respect, try to go to those countries and become in 2 years, say, Chinese. Good luck with that. Or in 2 generations. And that's the force of America. That's the compelling force of this idea, what I'm talking about. And that's why, because this is the call of America, and that's the true motor and true meaning of historical importance of this country. Thank you so much.
Mr. President, thank you very much. Terrific remarks and terrific time to think about what's happening in the world, what's happening in North Africa and the Middle East from the perspective of a country that's more than 8 years into your revolution. You caveated your remarks with that there's no textbook, the model in Georgia is not transferable, but I think you pulled out some important lessons. The one thing that quite struck me was that the greatest risk you face is inaction, that you can lose the window of opportunity for change. So I wanted to begin our conversation. I've got a couple questions, then I'll turn to the audience. With a question about U.S. role, the region, and Georgia. First, on the United States side, I think it was terrific for American audience to hear from your perspective the U.S. As an indispensable leader of the free world, your pushback against American decline. But part, I think, of what the United States is struggling with right now is how does it play the right supporting role in the transitions in the Middle East and North Africa. And if you think back to the Rose Revolution, at a certain point in time, the United States was quite close to Edward Shevardnadze, very concerned about your activities on the street, about others, had a known partner, a known quantity, someone that we had worked with closely through the end of the Soviet Union, and then in Georgia, and in many respects was reluctant to back away from that relationship. How do you, thinking of how the United States went from its posture in Georgia at a critical time, what kind of advice would you give us thinking about the posture that we need to be taking in the Middle East, in Egypt, in countries in transition? How do we overcome the perception, given our relationship with the previous governments, with Hosni Mubarak? How can the United States now play the right supporting role in these transitions?
I think every policy is, the most pragmatic policy is value-based policy, especially for America. I don't believe in sheer cynical pragmatic approach anyway, because ultimately I believe that idealism is the best real politics. I have utter disdain for realpolitik great theoreticians also here in the U.S. I have to put it very directly, and because in the end they always turned out to be less pragmatic than idealists. For instance, my very good friend, late Richard Holbrooke, he was as idealistic as one could get, and he was somebody who was all the time achieving the results. And I've seen all these great theoreticians, realpolitics, that would look down on, especially on small countries like us, and come on, all this, why do they even breathe there? We have to play this big power politics and never achieve anything in their life except writing big volumes. And so, I don't mean anybody in particular whom you know maybe, but the point that's the thing. I think that America has this amazing attraction for its values, and that's ultimately never underestimated. Soft power of America is amazingly big, and people are often doing this thing, underestimation. America is hated and this and that. We've done this and that, but I can tell you. Looking for instance, even at the regimes that are trying to capitalize on being besieged by America, it's by definition loser's game. Because I don't see a country in the world where public is unfriendly towards America. There are no such countries, or because of that reason, because America is a society of immigrants that understands those cultures better than any other country in the world. And those countries know it. In today's internet era, there is no way. What really created, by the way, amazing soft power for America is the internet. Because still, that really brought back center of power and the power, soft power, back to the United States. Look at what's happening in social media. And that's the tools to utilize. And so I would really argue that when you make policy decisions based on value, because ultimately they pay off very well. That was our experience. It's a small experience, but I'm sure they will pay off well in the Middle East, in Russia, and in all other different, geographic areas in the world.
Mr. President, in your remarks, you offered some key lessons from Georgia's revolution for the Middle East and North Africa. Let me ask a question from the perspective of those Egyptians, Tunisians that were empowered by what happened in Tahrir Square, that are coming to elections, right, coming to power through elections right now. What advice would you give them if you think about some, obviously you said this is very different circumstances, we take that fact, but if you think about your situation in Georgia and what folks are dealing with in Tunisia, Egypt today, two things stand out to me. One is, while Tahrir Square led to a revolution that ended Hosni Mubarak's reign, the military, obviously, was a source of continuity in Egypt, continuing to play a major role in the trajectory of the country. It reminds me at the start, I believe, of your presidency, when you were under pressure from some of the old guard to retain in the security sector folks with links to the old element. You rejected that, but I think about the situation that folks are faced with, Egypt, Tunisia today, with continuity on that military side. And second, in Georgia, there was an incredible sense of clarity in what the Georgian people wanted. And even looking at polling numbers today, regardless of the politics of it, overwhelming aspiration to move towards Europe, to move towards NATO, to the European, NATO and the European Union. I think it's been very clear in Egypt, Tunisia, places what many of the people have been against, but it's less clear what they aspire to. If you think of the role of the military, the lack of clarity in what they aspire to, what kind of advice, how would you talk about these challenges for folks that want to advance reform in Egypt, Tunisia, Libya?
I think the main thing is not to wait. I think the worst mistake people might be making, okay, now it's not the time, we should be careful, maybe 1, 2, 3 years later. They are empowered by the street, but it's like, you know how it's the street, it's like a wave, right? So wave strikes, but then another wave comes, and it might be even more powerful, and they run you over. Or it might be a tide. It comes forward, and then it retreats, and it might drag you back. So surfing there, you should hurry up. You are brought by wave, and then nothing will be stable. So move for front. I mean, I think the biggest frustrating thing always is that when you say, okay, no, we have all these intricacies of society and we have all these stereotypes. You know, people thought we had all these stereotypes in Georgia. But I think what revolution has really changed after Rose Revolution, what revolution after revolution, it's not about we were waving flags, but people started to think differently. We are a very ancient country. We had lots of our beliefs. We are several thousand years old. Georgian language is 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years old. Our alphabet, a little bit less, but it's very old as well. We had our own formed views about things, but then we start to move, and then we form our new views about present events. That's how it works. And if you say, no, we cannot touch this, we cannot touch that, we know that, ahead of the curve. And that applies as much as to the traditional societies in the Middle East. I don't see what is their peculiarity. I think this cultural relativism idea, frankly, is a way of justification for not doing something or doing it very low, or being basically not courageous enough to do things for some people.
Let me ask one last question now from the perspective of Georgia, and then I'll turn to the audience. Just catch my eye if you have a question. You're more than 8 years since the Rose Revolution. You talked about Georgia being a failed state. In 2003, I was in Georgia on the way to Afghanistan with NATO officials, and it was striking, the challenges that Georgia really was on the verge of being a failed state. You've created a functioning society, created a functioning government, expanded civil liberties, but where are you in this evolution, in Georgia's evolution, in your mind, 8 years after the Rose Revolution? This is a big year for Georgia with parliamentary elections coming up this fall.
Yeah, we are moving to, we have serious alterations in our political system. Parliament is being moved to another place, which is basically big psychological change in terms of mentality, political mentality in Georgia, being moved from the east to the west of the country. But this will be parliament that will be empowered to have much more say in forming the government. But I think the biggest challenge is still education, bringing up younger generation much faster in much more efficient ways, in totally different setting. That's the biggest challenge. We don't have 40 years to take country through the desert. We actually have 10 to 12, 13 maybe years, that's it. But we are living in terms of modern communication enough. I think, so I'm not comparing myself or anybody from my people to Moses or something, but the story has the true value to it, that, you need to, this change of mentality to understand the value of freedom. You need to get there. I think people in Georgia understood the value of freedom totally. I think they already knew it deep in their heart. They had it intrinsically in their national memory, because we've been fighting for a long time. But now they saw the benefits of it. They saw the new cities. They saw new schools, hospitals, skyscrapers, raising standards of life, more respect, more self-confidence, value of being master of your own work. And if everything, it's nice to feel strong on your own. And these are the things that now should become part of education system of new generation that will bring it with, with all the, we have now 10,000 Americans invited to teach English in Georgia. Well, 1,500 are permanently in place. So 5 years old gets to school, and they get a laptop to take back home, and they get an American to teach them English. And this generation will grow very different. And it will be impossible to lure them back into anything, or to force them back into anything for other purpose.
If I may, let me turn to the audience, try to catch my attention. Why don't we start over here, please? And please, when you get a mic, if you could introduce yourself.
Richard White's Hudson Institute. Mr. President, you were very kind about saying that no people in the world dislike the United States. However, I can think of one exception, and right off the bat, which is Pakistan. As you know, we've had a tense relationship with them, and recently was a cross-border incident. And one of the consequences of this is Pakistan has now sealed the border, for the most part, for the passage of NATO supplies. And this has increased the importance of the Northern Distribution Network, which mostly goes through Russia and Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. There's a small and important amount that goes through Georgia, and I wasn't sure when you met with the president whether you discussed how you might be able to expand this amount, given the dire situation NATO finds itself in at the moment. Thank you.
Well, Georgia, right now we have big railway constructed in Georgia that also connects it to Central Asian railways. We have, and incidentally also to Turkey and the European railway system. We have two major big airports that will open this year, international ones, with all-weather and big runways. We have other logistics that's possible. We have big seaports, and also now, it's not really applicable to Afghanistan, but to imagine, like Royal Caribbean is for the first time coming to the region, and the opening first big harbor in Georgia. So there is an infrastructure there. Obviously, it's a very friendly cut towards Americans, and very much part of this coalition effort. Now, it's not only us, it's other kinds of Central Asia, but still it's politically a very sound road, and I think economically as well very feasible. And I think the people are looking more and more at that one. And communications are good.
It's the second row here, please.
I'm Elaine Serrero, Franklin Fellow at the Department of State, and I was the Executive Director of Foreign Aid through Education, and I did a lot of work on the country of Georgia. Thank you very, very much, sir, for your wonderful presentation, and particularly so for highlighting the developments and the achievements that Georgia has had under your leadership. What I'd like to ask is, particularly with regard to the U.S. program Millennium Challenge account, Georgia has been, I understand, very successful in utilizing a program. How do you see that playing in the developments that you have achieved over the last few years?
Well, I think what's very important that now we are working with MCC. We have got the second tranche. I just met with Director Johannes, who is a very, very nice man, and we are trying to speed it up a little bit, because we are working on, we already have very nice help from you on vocational training. We want to make every high school in Georgia like very sophisticated one, and we are working on opening already this year, or starting to open a big technology campus of a major American university in Georgia. It will be first of this kind in the region. We already are building a building which will be, I think, one of the best buildings worldwide for any university. Very original architecture, 40 stories high, so like really very impressive. Will dominate skyline, but also the content should be there. And content is Americans coming in and setting up a campus. And so we have shortlisted several major American universities. And this will be a major historic contribution of MCC for long-term development. We are at the level, MCC had built an amazing road in Georgia that connected us to ethnic Armenian region, and actually that was something that was a political breakthrough. But now roads maybe are not as relevant as the educational thing. That's a road to the future already. The other roads we are building, and I think by then, within 2-3 years, there will be no bad roads left in Georgia, more or less. But now we need something that will give really long-term breakthrough. Georgia is really becoming a hub for our region, like South Korea in its region, like Singapore or Hong Kong used to be, now even more with free integration in China. So it's really, and that it needs educated population, it needs this global thinking, sophistication. You know, we did one laptop program. First thing is that we now have Intel factory in Georgia, and it's Georgian computers are a big example. Georgian police is equipped with computers made in Georgia, with some of the parts made, invented and or done by Georgians. So that's a big deal, and it's patented like a Georgian product. So we need to institutionalize this more. And you know, there is a potential. It's a small country, but it produces everything from, you know, small things, but to business jets, provided that you create conditions for us.
Let me pick up a couple of questions up here, if we may. This gentleman right here. And
my name is Adam Mack. I'm with Young Professionals in Foreign Policy. I was wondering, how has Georgia partnered with the private sector to ensure stability and development after your revolution? After your revolution.
Yes, well, as I said, we are the easiest place of Eastern and Central Europe to do business, according to World Bank. According to EBRD survey, the company surveyed the company, we are third least corrupt economy in Europe. According to Forbes, we are fourth least tax burden country in the world after UAE, Qatar, and Hong Kong. We are, as I said, we have the whole number of procedures that are fastest in the world. We have this one-stop principle for many businesses. So in many respects, for instance, for due diligence for proper transaction, you don't even need lawyers. So maybe law firms suffered most of all. Among maybe the only business that really suffered in Georgia were law firms. As a lawyer, I don't regret that at all. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, Georgian economy has quadrupled almost in nominal terms since I'm president. We've done a very good infrastructural projects. We're now, as I said, developing new airports. We've developed new cities, and the way we developed them, we created roads there, electricity lines, water systems, and then business followed almost in parallel, because then they came in with high-rise buildings and, you know, all kind of stuff. And it's a good partnership. They trust us. When we say stuff is good, they usually listen. But we have flat taxes. We have, as I said, we have, you know, 98% of Georgians said in Gallup survey 5-6 years ago that they encountered, 6-7 years ago, that they encountered corruption firsthand. Now it's less than 0.2%, 0.1%, and even then, when we observed what it was most medical hospitals. And again, to go back to this, now private business has just built 150 new hospitals, which means that even that will disappear, because it will no longer be just putting money in the pocket of a public hospital doctor. So from that point of view, yeah, I mean, can you imagine, you know, we are an investment-driven economy, and with all the complications in our geopolitics, we got the economic growth in crisis, and after the war, the year before last year, 6.5, 6.6%, and last year just under 7%. This year we are expecting double digit if world economy doesn't go to hell. which is big question mark still.
Go ahead and pick up these two have been waiting. This gentleman and this woman right here. If you could pass the microphone in and here. Sorry. This gentleman here and this woman right here, please. I wanted to take both of them.
Hi, my name is Sam Lebo, and I was a member of the first phase of the Teach and Learn program back 2 summers ago.
Yeah.
Had the opportunity to meet you in Batumi, actually. And I wanted to follow up on how that program is going, actually, to some extent. When we were there, we encountered some really interesting things, and it seemed as though the people really wanted to have us there and were very eager to learn, but some of the students certainly didn't really understand what was possible, and some of the teachers we encountered seemed to be working very hard, but were dramatically underpaid, were having to work basically another full day after school in order to support themselves, and then obviously some of the education infrastructure, could have been improved. And I'm wondering, now it's been a little bit longer and that program has been ongoing. Why do you feel like having all of these volunteers come in has made an impact on maybe what's available as far as funding for education, and also just the general aspiration and dreams of the students in Georgia?
Guess what? One of the things to which you contributed is also their pay rise, because now we have this program that if existing teachers, pass tests on IT, English mostly, but also 1 or 2 subjects which is more easy for them, then they get even a 3-fold or 4-fold salary rise. So that's why those who work with you, for them it's easier to pass those tests. And that's the thing, where we're more for more. We also need better education for our kids. You should also have noticed that not always their level was good as well. So, because that's not also always their fault. They come from Soviet legacy, and they went through many years of having no electricity, no heating at schools. They had hard survival issue, even like to warm up themselves up. Just before you arrived, at least they were getting some pay. Just before 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, they would get no salary at all, or get very minimum. So from that point of view, there was some progress, but now they have this reward program that if you pass, then you get more. And I think more and more of them, we already have several thousand that passed. This year we encourage more and more to take them exams, and one of the things that, you were there really helps. And I think the other thing that happened, of course, at the beginning the program was, like every program, had bumpy start. I've talked to many U.S. officials who were appalled by the existence of this program for obvious reasons. Suddenly you get like 2,000 Americans coming into country. How do you take care of them? But basically, I think most of them were taken care of quite okay by people, and then gradually, people locally learn more, Americans learn more, and now it's kind of merging of cultures. I think what's happening, convergence, and it's going really well. I think this is the kind of program. After 10,000 Americans go through it, it will be another country. It's one of few revolutionary things we are doing that really will transform Georgia beyond recognition. I was recently at some show with British actors, and I was shocked. Everybody understood in the hall every word that was said on the stage, and it wouldn't be this thing 3 years ago. And I think partly it had to do something with your program. And it's just linguistic curiosity. It's just chance in life to get this skill.
Okay, and please. Should be on it.
Winston Packer with the U.S. Helsinki Commission. Having been afforded the experience of the revolutions in your region, which now afford you to offer perspectives on the uprisings in the Arab countries, what do you think is there a real prospect that the Russians will be allowed their Arab Spring? And what might that portend for Georgia, given that successive Russian administrations have failed to change their policy regarding their military presence in Georgia?
Well, I think the best news there is that almost every major Russian opposition figure now says that they want Georgian type of reforms. Russia seems to have tremendous hard power in comparison with all of us around. But we suddenly also tend to have some power towards Russia, which is a soft power, which is something that I always hoped we would get, but I never believed it until I saw it firsthand in statements of Russian opposition figures. And there is one of the biggest bestsellers now in Moscow. It's a book by a young Russian author named How Georgia Made It. It's a big bestseller. One of the leaders of a neighboring country to Russia told me he read the book 6 times. The idea is spreading. Because, if you talk, say, about Estonia, from which we were also learning, for Russians, Estonia is always seemed a little bit like extraterrestrials anyway. Strange people, too blonde, too strangely talking, too disciplined, too hardworking, much less drinking. No. Did look real. Georgians, they were sweethearts. Good singers, good food, good eaters, good drinkers, warm, nice climate, palm trees, the only palm trees in Russian Empire. And these Georgians suddenly wanted to be a country, a state, and then they are suddenly a successful state when they were the most criminalized, corruption, greedy, and everything. How come? And then they even took up the arms when Russia decided to punish them for that. So, and that's a big cultural change. And from that point of view, it's really, they are looking at us very carefully. And I think we've caused a number of important Russian delegations. And we are also, this year we are expecting up to maybe 700,000, maybe 1 million Russian tourists. And for Russian tourists, it's very different. Usually tourists, when they come, they like Georgia, but Russians are like particularly curious ones because they are, they go back excited university because we monitor it through social media and we see usually the feedback, and it's amazing. And it's things that we are used to, which are normal, like normal roads, helpful, smiling police, like roadside, nice places, nice buildings, things which we already got used to. For them, everything is very new and interesting. And then they don't expect it. They only expect it in Western Europe. There is a joke about Russian coming into, and by the way, Russians don't need visa to come into Georgia. Southern Russians don't need visa. So from the neighboring regions, and Georgians almost cannot get to Russia. I mean, it's out of question. So, and we did it deliberately because we want them to come and see. And so but even those some of the Russians who need visa, they come in and they can get it in the airport very fast. And even that, I think, is not even necessary now. But anyway, there's a joke that Russia was coming in and you fill this form on the border, but no more. Now we can pass through the gates with your passport. But that's what they were at that time. And then they would say, okay, so the purpose of the trip, etc. And then like your profession and things, and the purpose of the trip. And then, of course, it says occupation. And he just marked it, no, just tourism. And so, because 20% of the territory is militarily occupied. And that's what we were always saying, that we certainly welcome Russian tourists, we welcome Russian businesses, we welcome, we were under Russian bombs in 2008, but we were still selling electricity those days to Russia. And but that's okay, because we should separate those two things. And that's our experience, that we should keep people to people. And now what we are seeing, that slogans in the street of Moscow by main opposition leaders is that let's do Georgian type reforms, let's do Georgian type corruption, we want Georgian type police reform. Actually, their police law was rewritten from Georgian police law by Medvedev. Medvedev sent people to study it. We met with the people's or our officials were, tacitly sent by Russian government to study our police law. Of course, they implement it in a very wrong way. But even under Medvedev's administration, that is basically bombed Georgia, gave orders, at least formally. Of course, Putin was the real puppet master there, but still, even there we were willing to cooperate, because if they become more normal and modern, that's fine. But I think that for Russia to modernize as it looks like now, they really need real change. And I think that change might not be as far as away as people think. I've lived in the Soviet Union. I've seen changes come very fast. I've also heard some of the sounds that remind me very much of sounds of my early young years, when elite was disgruntled, cynical, people getting satirical. You know, satire is the most fashionable thing right now in Russia. Satire is something that kills any authoritarian government. Democratic governments usually joke about themselves all the time. Authoritarian governments hate the suppressed jokes about them. But more they suppress it, more people joke. And now we see more and more jokes. And when it's more jokes, it's no more joke anymore for the leaders, right? So, you know, I think there will be, I think there is we are living in an interesting epoch. And I think this movement and strive for freedom is unstoppable. I think we are dealing with very smart population. And I think overall, I'm very happy that they also take quick notice of our changes. And that's the biggest appealing force. You know, I went to Kyrgyzstan, and unfortunately, maybe many Georgians don't know things about Kyrgyzstan. But I was shocked that every young person I met in an American university audience in Bishkek knew everything about Georgian reforms. Our success and failures, both, they analyzed it critically. It wasn't like thing, but I was welcomed even much better. We are still quite popular in Georgia, but there I was like very. I mean, I came into hall with under the music of Jesus Christ Superstar when he comes into Jerusalem. I was very, very baffled by that, but that shows their approach, that they really want something new. Interesting country, by the way. Lots of young energy, and I recommend you to take a closer look at them.
Mr. President, I have a much longer list of folks that want to ask questions, but I know you have an interview to go to. So unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap up. I know there are quite a few of you who still had some questions to ask. We may have to channel these to you after the fact. But Mr. President, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for coming to the U.S. Institute for Peace.
Thank you.
Being very...
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.